Loot boxes. Virtual items with randomized rewards that are given to players by progressing in a game or purchased using real money. Now, loot boxes have been around for many years, as far back as 2004 in fact, but it wasn't until 2007 where it began to gain traction. ZT Online was a Chinese MMORPG that used treasure chests to give players random gear to reward them. They were the pioneers of the lock and key system. The lock and key system requires the players to not only have a loot box, but to also have a key that could open that specific loot box. For example, let's say you have a blue loot box and a red loot box. If you get a blue key, you would be able to open the blue loot box. Meanwhile, the red would remain closed until you get a key for it. Loot boxes came to the US in 2008 with the release of FIFA 09. They were implemented in the FIFA Ultimate Team mode, aka FUT. Players would be able to create teams using any player from any team, but the only way to unlock these players was by opening loot boxes, or in this case, packs. I mean, sure, you could play and grind your way into getting enough in-game currency for a pack, or you could simply pay your way to the top. And even if you do get enough for a pack, it wasn't guaranteed for you to get the players you wanted. Meanwhile, someone else just pays and pays for packs until they eventually get everything they want. However, in September of 2011, there would be a big leap in the development of loot boxes. Let's go back a couple years. In 2007, Valve released Team Fortress 2, a first-person hero shooter. The game was initially released for $50. In June of 2010, TF2 would add its own version of loot boxes, which used the lock and key system mentioned previously. TF2's way of loot boxes were for cosmetic use only, which meant you didn't gain an advantage from the items you get, and you were able to trade them and sell them. This worked well for Valve. Too well, in fact, that in September of 2011, they made the game free to play and garnered 12 times more players. This business practice of making games free and making a passive income through loot boxes spread to other Valve games such as Dota 2 and CSGO. In CSGO, the items you obtained from the crates were able to be traded for real money. Fast forward to 2016, loot boxes were beginning to face criticism, as many of them had items that would give you advantages. Games such as FIFA, Madden, NBA 2K, and many more began to use loot boxes in a way where you had to get them to obtain the best player and not feel like you were left behind. Overwatch, which released in May of 2016, brought things back to basics, as the loot boxes in that game would only give you cosmetics. There was no advantage in opening any of the loot boxes. It would all come crashing down for the industry at the end of 2017. The release of Star Wars Battlefront 2 and its backlash started a trend that would get rid of loot boxes from many AAA games. Battlefront 2's loot boxes were the most egregious by far. You needed them to unlock characters and upgrades. For example, if you wanted Darth Vader, it would take roughly 40 hours to obtain him. With each match lasting around 15 minutes, that means that it would take you about 160 games just to get him. Unless, of course, you paid. And that was the driving force of these boxes, to squeeze as much money out of you as possible. If not, you'd be underpowered and wouldn't be able to do much. And it's not just on console games. Mobile games like Clash of Clans, Clash Royale, Candy Crush, and many more bombard you with ads to their in-game stores just to get as much money out of you as possible. By 2018, loot boxes had garnered over $30 billion for the industry. But it didn't go unnoticed in Europe. Belgium's gaming authority ruled that loot boxes in games like FIFA, Overwatch, and CSGO constituted illegal gambling, forcing publishers to either remove loot boxes from Belgian versions or withdraw their games from the market. In another example, Valve was fined for their Counter-Strike loot boxes and made changes to its marketplace for Dutch users. Along with, in 2020, the Dutch Gaming Authority fined EA 10 million euros over FIFA's Ultimate Team packs. The main concern with these practices has been the kinds of people who play video games the most: children. Studies suggest that the dopamine a child gets from opening loot boxes and randomly getting something they want can lead to a gambling addiction. While some blame is on the parents, these companies know what they're doing by trying to prey on kids and exploit them, and also trying to get them to spend as much of their parents' money as possible. In January of this year, the developer of Genshin Impact was banned by the FTC from selling loot boxes to teens under 16 without parental consent, and were also fined $20 million. The latest news about microtransactions in video games came in March, when the European Union announced they were putting restrictions in place in order to protect kids from these predatory practices. Loot boxes was just the start of predatory business practices used by game companies. It has since evolved into other microtransactions. Hopefully more countries start cracking down on them and protect kids from succumbing to such a dangerous addiction.